John, welcome to Early Days.
Thanks for having me. Excited to catch up.
Me too.
I spend my whole life chasing you. When will you come home to me?
So we're here to talk about Synonym. I said it right on the first try.
Yeah, I have trouble with it too.
So yeah, let's catch up on it. Can you give me just kind of the past few years you've been working on it, and just give us a recap of what that's been like, and then we can jump into the Pubky stuff.
Sure. Um, so we started Synonym about 5 years ago. Something different about Synonym, maybe compared to other startups or founders, is that it's actually a subsidiary. It was designed to be that way intentionally. I didn't want to do VC fundraising and all this kind of thing. I just wanted to be able to have a budget to build what I wanted to be able to build. And so back then I had a budding, I guess, relationship with Apollo Arduino from Tether, and I put together kind of a plan of what I wanted to build and got that kind of approved and started that some years ago. Um, for a company that's been around 5 years, um, we are still trying to do a lot of stuff. So, shipping the entire vision is something that's been a lot of work and taking a lot of time, and growing the company to the size that can ship that vision has taken a lot of time. But we are in a nice spot now. We're about 21 people currently and trying to hire about seven or eight more throughout the rest of the year. And what Synonym is basically company where we're trying to take the promises of and the sentiments of hyper Bitcoinization and the kind of ethos of Bitcoin or ethos, I don't know how we're supposed to say that word, um, and extend it into an actual model, an ecosystem that is a real proposal. In other words, right now people say, oh, one day everybody's just going to use Bitcoin and it's going to be great. And the governments will be gone and the big banks will be dead or whatever your favorite narrative of Bitcoin is. But there isn't a lot of, and here's how it's going to happen, and here's what it will look like. And so that's what I tried to do, is create an ecosystem that had all the minimum requirements that I thought would need to be there in order to have a free market, censorship resistance, all of the things that are interesting about decentralized technology, self-hosted peer-to-peer technology, stuff like this. So we're building something, our vision is kind of called the atomic economy. And that's just the idea that we're trying to go down to the individual level. We're trying to build the system from the individual outward and then give people all the tools they need to be able to figure out who to trust, how much, and with what. And adding in all of the kind of uh, the values of Bitcoiners when it comes to decentralization and self-sovereignty, and the values of certain aspects of economics and general freedom templates. So yeah, we're that's what we do at Synonym. So far, we have shipped a mobile wallet that supports Bitcoin and Lightning, self-custodial. There's a Lightning node in the wallet. It's called BitKit, as I mentioned. Um, and that is powered by our LSP, which it has a brand called BlockTank, but it's mostly just there to power BitKit. It's not something we're trying to turn into a separate business or anything, so much as our node is called BlockTank, and it is making the BitKit user experience better. And then we also have the PubKey protocol and application that we're building in order to interface with that protocol, and a bunch of other little things inside of that and things that connect all of these things. Whereas the goal, sometime either late this year or next year, we want to demonstrate the entire loop, basically, of the atomic economy, where you'll be able to sell things and buy things and post things all in a way that ultimately you're under control. Even if you have people that you trust, you have credible exit systems where you can get out of a bad situation and totally recover with all of your contacts, all of your data, etc.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm, we've used Synonym um, app. I think you had it a couple times on shared on Stacker News. I've downloaded a few different versions of it and tried and tested it. Um, I haven't tried the LSP version of it. Can you tell me a little bit more about how working with Lightning and integrating that, and how I know you've written pieces about it on Stacker News and Twitter and stuff like that, but just how much of a lift that was and painful, and just give the people out there a little inside info
Sure.
on that.
As far as the version of BitKit, the stages that we went through, BitKit was always a self-custodial wallet, although it did have stages where were researching certain technologies and trying to see what it would be like to implement them. We've implemented everything from Omnibolt to what else? We played with RGB for like really early on. We we took a look at the green light setup from Breeze. Like we played with a lot of different things, but in the end, we went with LDK. We even had LND Mobile in there before LDK. And we got into LDK pretty early. We saw that Blue Wallet had implemented an early implementation that seemed to be working okay, and it looked like they were getting ready to go public with it. And so we kind of, jumped in as well. And it turned out that we were still a bit early. And this is probably, if you want this kind of series of interviews to be about founders and issues they deal with, maybe a major lesson here to take from it is that like you have to be really careful with accepting dependencies from other teams for something that isn't finished yet. And this is not a knock on those teams so much as we all get very excited in Bitcoin and we all want to be the first one to ship something and all want to show our support for a certain new BIP or a new protocol or a new soft fork or whatever. Or we want to fight the fight and join the movement and all this stuff. But getting in early is rarely an advantage unless you are in the beginning of a wave. You know what I mean? Like if getting in early and implementing Lightning in 2017, 2018, maybe even 2019, you could seize an advantage at that time and get a lot of users into your app. But to do it later and to do it with other fledgling technology, you pay a lot of trade-offs. You know what I mean? And it's hard to find the balance for a company building on Lightning between being dependent on other teams like the Spiral team or the Lightning Labs team, et cetera, or like going even deeper and having even more risk in supporting Lightning by doing something like async, where they are having the entire stack. You know what I mean? They make the app, they make the implementation, they handle everything. That gives you a lot of control and ability to innovate, but it turns your whole company into that. You are a Lightning company building Lightning things. And that's not my personal goal so much as I said earlier, to demonstrate a whole ecosystem. So yeah, if anybody listening is interested in maybe more lessons learned regarding Lightning in the BitKit wallet, I did a presentation, I think not last year, but the year before in Riga, where I did like a diary of a Lightning, wallet or something like this, where I
Yeah, I
went
think I
through
saw
some
that. Yeah,
some of these lessons. Yeah.
yeah, that was good stuff. Yeah, I really love that explanation because I see it often where there will be a founder or a early stage project even where they'll go full all in on some technical implementation or something, and they'll have evaporated all their runway or um, whatever it is, even their enthusiasm sometimes on some bip sometimes, and then before you know it, they're just recycled, right? And
Yeah.
and
There's a lot of
unfortunately,
factors.
yeah,
The FOMO is strong. That's a big factor. When you start seeing a whole momentum and a whole trend building and growing, and it's not something that you're involved with, you start trying to think, oh, should I hop onto this? Should I adopt this technology? And Bitcoin culture is kind of like a little hype system, when it comes to some things. And so it's hard to know whether it's just hype or it's actually the next big thing, and whether to get in early. And like I said, there can be an advantage if you get in totally early, but there can be a huge like cost if you are wrong and that thing doesn't go anywhere, or if you're later in the stage where the hype has kind of died down. Like if a new technology is truly useful, then when you get in doesn't matter that much because it's a growing industry. Everybody's using it and everybody's looking for different versions of applications that meet their needs. But if the industry is stagnant or even declining, then the only thing you can do is try to like fight over the scraps. You can try to like, say, oh, my wallet is better than the other Lightning wallet because it does this now. And it's like this little nuance that maybe users don't care about that much, but they get really defensive and strong about just because it's the way it is in Bitcoin. You have to like have a team with everything. Um,
Right.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Um, Good stuff. So let's jump into the pub key stuff because I think that's the most fascinating thing here. You published an article, or you published several articles, I want to say since back in November about this kind of like next web, and I use these quotations because it's very John Carvalho, right?
Well,
It's
I did
very
say it, so it's a quote.
well, it's very you, dude. Like you're always going to be that hard-nosed Bitcoiner that's going to stand out sometimes, to your own detriment, and sometimes just because you want to be the loudest person in the room saying, "Hey, man, I'm standing on this fucking table and I'm saying this is what it is." And listen,
That's not how I would
I
describe
look
it,
at
but
it. I mean, that's how I look at it, and it got my
I'll say,
attention. I
okay,
mean,
it's at
it
least
got
not
my
my
attention.
intention.
I mean, it got
Yeah.
my attention. It works. And so, what like tell us this vision because it is a vision in some ways, and then tell us why this is different than anything else out there, John. But also describe to us why we should care as Bitcoiners, and why this is important.
Sure. I mean, the structure of your question is also pretty well answered by an article I did write recently. So again, for listeners, if for whatever I fail to communicate clearly in this interview, there is an intentional written article called Building the Atomic Economy or such that is in Medium under my name, Bitcoin Error Log, or under Pubkey, the Pubkey blog. And that does go into detail about why the like what is made out of, what the components are, as well as why we're doing it, and even why specifically Bitcoiners should care. Even though this is not Bitcoin technology, this is just it's the next web. So it's something that other Bitcoin technologies may use, and I'll try to get into that as well. But the main differentiating thing about PubKey on the protocol level is that we have a concept of a public key domain. And basically, we call this PKDNS, or public key domain name system. And for anyone familiar with domain names, when you buy them, what you're actually buying is like rights to a list, a centralized list provided by the registrar that tells people to what server to look on when you want to visit that website, where the actual data is. Well, what we did is we took that concept and we take a public key, the same concept of as your listeners would be familiar with in Bitcoin or in Nostr or any public key based authentication, idea. And instead of signing all of the data and signing and trying to create this system where you have to sign everything and deal with that and the trade-offs there, we only sign for now the DNS record itself. So that information that says where to go and find the data, we take that information, we sign it with the key. But the really special part is taking that information and now putting it into what's called mainline DHT. Mainline DHT, for those who don't know, and there's an article about this as well, if anyone wants to learn more about it. Mainline DHT is basically the largest, oldest, most decentralized network on the internet. This is nobody has contested this. I've never heard anything that comes even close. And I mention this because the reason we're using the network is for censorship resistance. It's for what we call, or what most people might call, a credible exit, or in Bitcoin, there's a similar concept of a unilateral exit, this kind of thing. The idea there is that now instead of trusting a specific company to, you know, own your domain for you essentially, and then censor you if they want to, or if the government tells you to, you can place this information into this large decentralized, well, basically it's called a hash table. And so this hash table is a way of storing the data in an organized way across many, many nodes that can be found very, very quickly as well. So there's not really any latency to worry about with fetching the information from the system. But what it does is it makes it so you don't have to use a domain registrar. You can actually have your public key as your domain name, both conceptually and literally if you really wanted to. This allows, again, to build from the individual outward, right? So even if you in Pubkey wanted to self-host or use a trusted host, a cloud provider or whatever, in the Pubkey system, you would still have this ability to now respawn or change the location of your data if the person that's helping you serve your data is no longer trustworthy, or they've mutated your data, they've stolen your data, they've done something that misbehaved, and you said, okay, well, I'm going to take my data and I'm going to post it somewhere else, and I'm going to just use that server instead. And that could be a server you host yourself, or a competitive Pubkey cloud provider or app provider, or what we call home server provider. And so, yeah, that's a major difference compared to the other protocols. Nostr does not have this is what would be called a discovery solution. Nostr does not have a discovery solution, and it does not have the capability, thus, as part of this solution, to do key delegation. This is a way to have like sub keys or sub accounts or sessions on multiple devices underneath a key. Like in Nostr, you have to put your key into every single thing because you have to sign everything, so you have to have a hot key. So in PubKey, your keys could actually be cold because you only really need to use them when you're updating the location of your data. You're updating your DNS records or your PK DNS records. And then the final thing on the protocol level that's a bit different is, instead of having a relay system like Nostr or other methods, we have a home server, which is basically a primary server that people are expected to find the source of truth of your data. That can be trusted or self-hosted, but there's always an assumption that there is a primary server, and then from there you can have fallbacks or mirrors or other things like this. So it's a little bit inverse to Nostr, where they started with relays and kind of a spray and pray, and now they're building out essentially trusted servers that you can use as well and things like this, but they still lack the discovery mechanism for that true censorship resistance. I can proceed to the app level and what's different if you like, or if you want
I
to ask
think
about protocol first.
let's jump into kind of like let's jump into the core principle stuff, because I think that's gonna resonate first with everybody, and then we can jump into the technical stuff. So the self-sovereignty side of it, I think we can all understand the key stuff, right? The key generation. So it sounds like what you're saying is you would have these, I guess, these public keys of a sort that we would all own that would sit in cold storage. Is that kind of where this comes from? But these are all tied to, let's say, pleblab.com or .dev for ours. So we would have like a
or
pleblab.
your actual identity.
Okay, so cars.
I guess I hadn't made that clear entirely till now, but while the system, I'm telling you, when I spoke about the protocol, I'm saying how it works in a functional way and using familiar terms as best as I can. But the end goal here is that these keys are ultimately the best way to represent you as an identity digitally.
Okay.
And so because you own the key, because you can keep it cold, this gives you control that you don't normally have in other systems.
So this could be just my own identity keys, basically, for car.
Right. And you could have sub keys, you could have different not identities, or you could have sessions underneath that identity for multiple devices, like say on different phones. You could have multiple home server sessions where you could have different authentications. So it's mostly just for, to zoom out all the way and just be conceptual. I would say the idea here is that, you know how when you use a normal platform, you have this concept of a walled garden and you get stuck inside?
Yeah.
Like even when either you get banned and you lose all your followers or most of your followers or a lot of your history, or you can only export your data in a way that you can't really quite reuse it. And so you kind of get cut off. It's a walled garden. This transcends the walled garden. That's what the credible exit is, a credible exit from a walled garden.
Right. Okay. So this would be like a login to our computer, or a login to a website, or a login to any social network of a sort.
Well, it would be a way to yes, those things are specifically ways you could do it, and that would be fine. But more, again, more abstractly, it's just a primitive to, if you rebuilt the web with this assumption where all the users were keys and they all had these powers with their keys, you can now build on that and you can build from there. You can change the incentive system for how servers are related to users. For example, now they just compete on service, right? Because they know if they over censor you, if they're overbearing to you, that you can just go to an alternative provider. So it commoditizes serving of data. And so this creates a sort of like I don't know, like a standoff. You know what I mean? Like they know that if they don't provide you good service, you can just leave. Whereas that's not really true right now with a walled garden. They do everything they can to trap you and stop you from leaving.
And then so the server, would we run our own server at home, or would the data be stored, I guess?
Well, that would be up to you. So the system supports either way. In other words, it's trying to recognize that the way that people use the web is for a reason, that centralization is always going to be of a certain use case on the web. Like getting many people to congregate on one server provides a lot of advantages, and that it makes things very fast. You can get a lot of people into one platform. And so there's always going to be an incentive. Or another example would be, say you get 1 million followers. You can't serve your Twitter feed for 1 million followers from your laptop. Like you need servers. You need to have services that provide you a scaled, useful web. But what's missing from that web is a way to kind of, you know, exit. Is a way to say, okay, this isn't what I want, and I need to start over somewhere else. And I don't want to start from zero. I want to start from who I am already and the people I have, the data I have, etc.
Okay, and then I guess the closest thing that we have to it right now is kind of like Mastodon and Blue Sky. I think Blue Sky has like 21 million users. I don't think Twitter's not decentralized at all, right? As far as I know.
No, no. I mean, they do claim that some of their like algorithm stuff and weighting stuff is open source, but no, there's no openness related to Twitter at all. Um, I think that Blue Sky is generally open as far as being able to export your data and such, but the issue is that there's nowhere to export it to right now, and there's not a lot of incentive for people. There's not a lot of incentive for people to self-host, and so they need something like what we have because everybody's using it in a centralized way right now, and that means that they're extremely censorable. This is tricky when you talk about Blue Sky because they like censorship, and it's a
Yeah.
feature, it's a differentiation for them. So that is definitely going to end up distorting how much decentralization matters and things like this.
Yeah, I was watching one of the talks that they had at South by, and they have no problem grabbing users. Like they are really good at like just getting users, John. It's pretty impressive.
You mean
Um,
Blue Sky?
yeah, Blue Sky.
Yeah,
You
I
should,
think they're at 30 plus million, 30,
yeah,
35 million
it's
even.
pretty
Yeah.
incredible. Like they have no problem getting users there. Um,
Well, one thing you have to be careful about is in all decentralized systems, it's extremely easy to spoof users. In
Mhm.
Noster, in Blue Sky, etc. I
Right.
don't know that they are, and I'm not trying to make an accusation so much as remind people that measuring things that are not centralized is difficult.
Right.
This affect like it even affects how you design decentralized applications and things like this. Like you can't always create. I'm sure you've seen in Noster like when if you tried like multiple different apps, you might get a different view. You know what I mean? You might not see the same uh, posts from the same people. Not everybody supports the same kinds and things like this, so
Yeah.
you don't have all the same interoperability for all of the content types, and so you get
Yeah.
inconsistency. Being able to see like one platform might show you a different amount of zaps than another on the same post, because it's hard to create a consistent state across everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other one is I guess Mastodon also has, I guess they have the Fediverse, I guess, going for it.
Yeah, Mastodon is more like open sourcing Twitter so you could host your own Twitter. So it's somewhere in between what everybody else is doing. It's the way it was the most successful design pattern before Bitcoin. So before Bitcoin, when people were trying to find ways to decentralize social media, Mastodon was it. It was the thing that everybody kind of pointed at. But the problem with Mastodon is there wasn't really any practical way to traverse the multiple federated servers, like to pick up. In other words, if you get censored inside somebody's self-hosted Twitter and now you want to pick up and move somewhere, you have to actually go to a whole entire new environment. There's no way to reconstruct what you had there. It's its own little state, and every federated instance of Mastodon is its own little universe. And so there's no way to kind of recreate everything in the entire state that you had, like all of the followers, all of the history of posts and conversations and threads. You have to abandon that when you change Mastodon servers. And so that all it really was what was cool was that now you can host your own Twitter. That's kind of what was cool about it.
And then we move on to Nostr. And Nostr, how would you describe that? Where it started and where it's at now? How would you describe that?
I mean, disclaiming that I'm biased, but trying to find a useful way to portray it, I would say a good way to portray Nostr might be as like a proto version of what we've done. Like I would, if I were to say to go into Nostr, and now granted, we didn't try to redesign Nostr. We've been working on these designs since before Nostr. But if I were, how I would look at it, I would say they're kind of doing what we're doing backwards. They started with like the just very minimum, most simple way to approach the problem, and then just shipped it and said, hey, anybody come in here and build this with us. But that's difficult to do in a community way. It's difficult to do in a decentralized way and still make, good accomplishments. And so the challenge for Nostr is simply, are they going to now embrace the challenges of the corners they cut in order to be simple? Are they going to end up making things that are even more complex than they need to be because of the architecture decisions? Like it's again, I'm biased and I have no problem saying so, but I'm trying to be objective. From what I can ascertain, it's a very elegant solution, what we've done with signing the DNS record, putting it in DHT, and then being able to discover the data endpoint. This is something that Nostr is totally missing. Nostr could definitely add it, but it's a breaking change. And so they've been hesitant to do it, and I don't know how interested they are in things that are not made within the Nostr community. Seems like there's not much interest there. There's a lot of tribalism across all of these projects. So yeah, I would say it's more of an early form of all this stuff. And now they're trying, you saw that they have Blossom and they have these, different ways of mitigating the relay system, but you end up adding the complexity back in. And so I wouldn't say Nostr is simpler so much as it's less complete.
Yeah. So it does seem like all these different kind of, I guess we can call them decentralized systems, or how would you describe these different
web protocols, peer-to-peer web protocols,
yeah,
or decentralized web protocols? I mean, we tend to gravitate towards calling it the next web because we're trying to have a broader view of the design of the system. But Nostr was more focused on just saying decentralized social media, and then as more people got involved, they've expanded the narrative to be beyond social media, right? And Blue Sky is similar. They're just social media, but theoretically, the AT protocol, which they have, and the design that they're doing, could make a lot of the promises that we're trying to make, especially if they added the DHT aspect to it.
And then let's talk about the payments and settlement stuff, because that's going to be a key part to what you're building with Pubky. Obviously, I don't think Blue Sky is doing any kind of payment stuff. I know Elon's going to build his kind of WeChat super app with Twitter. I don't think Mastodon is doing anything on the payment stuff. Can you kind of fill us in on all these different kind of next web stuff and kind of what they're doing with payments and how you guys are looking at payments differently? We finally got a sponsor. Can you believe it? Vintech. They're a legal firm out of Dallas, Texas, who PlebLab uses. We actually use Jim, who is this amazing gentleman, Central Texas lawyer, straight shooter, and he does legal expertise, and he has this amazing thing called Vintech. It's a place where you can get access to legal forms. You don't have to use ChatGPT to spin up some kind of gibberish. You can actually get these legal forms that are there already pre-built. You get access to his consulting 2 times a month. There's 25% off all his legal work that he applies to the network of attorneys that he knows. There's no long-term commitment. It's all for $199 a month. He also has this other thing called VinTech Plus, which is 3 hours of additional services per month, which is contract review, drafting, LLC, corporate formation, all that kind of stuff. That's for $999 a month. And it's affordable business legal stuff for startups, founders like yourself. Use the code PlebLab at myvintech.com and get 10% off your subscription. And a big thanks to Jim and the VinTech team for backing the builder community and helping us push things forward. All right, let's get back to the show.
Sure. For context, I'll say that you're right, that I don't know of Blue Sky having any plans for payments, but I don't follow it too closely. So they might be. I could be totally wrong. And similar for Mastodon, I don't think there's probably integrations with Stripe and things like this, but as far as there being some sort of solution, I don't think they're trying to attempt that. And then with Nostr, you have Zaps, and I think you also have some. Again, I don't follow it 100% closely, but I think you also have some kind of e-commerce projects trying to build out that, mostly through Lightning as a payment method, or even simpler like Lightning addresses or this kind of thing. So the Zaps model, I always felt, in tipping in general as a social media concept, as a web concept, I always felt was overhyped. I've watched it come and go probably 4 or 5 times since the beginning of Bitcoin, where there was like this startup or browser extension or whatever it may be, projects and hype cycles around tipping in general and Bitcoin tipping. And the last versions were like talking about Zaps, and value for value was another major narrative. In my opinion, I think this all falls short of actually solving, payment problems and, having a digital economy. I don't think this is how society works. In other words, you just kind of do stuff and hope people give you money. I don't, it's nice to also get that money, right? But I don't think this is something that you want to depend on and call a solution. So we do have specific designs and focus on that intensely. And our answers are, one, obviously, we do support on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning in our wallet. So I'm not trying to say that these are evil or incorrect decisions to prioritize, so much as they're incomplete as well. I don't think the world is ever going to only use Bitcoin. I think it's possible that it will use it more and more. We don't know how they will use it more and more. It could be through banks, custodians, it could be through Lightning, could be through ARC, could be through on-chain SegWit addresses, on-chain legacy addresses. We have many, many payment protocols just within Bitcoin alone, and we don't stop proposing them and making them. And bootstrapping a protocol is a lot of work, and it's a pain in the ass for people making applications to implement it, merchants to implement it, even payment processors to implement it, so merchants can implement it. And nobody is quite addressing it in the abstract, so we're going to try. So we have a project called PayKit, and this is basically a way of taking many payment protocols and interfacing them over one identity. So basically, that concept where I mentioned using your public key as a domain. Well, imagine instead of only having your social media posts or whatever be where it points, but your domain also points to where your payment methods are. And so when somebody wants to pay you, you say, here, scan my QR code, I'm Car, add me as a contact. But what they can also do now that they added you is fetch any information you want to make available to them about how to pay you. And so the idea is that PayKit could be implemented into any wallet. And what would happen is it would act as an interface to find payment method matches across different peers. So this way, when you want to sell something, say in the Pubky app, you don't have to specify payment methods in the Pubky app. You can have peer-to-peer, the payments handled peer-to-peer. You can leave Synonym in our home server, in our hosting, and any services we provide within the platform of the Pubky app itself. And you can handle all of the payments out of band entirely, directly peer to peer. And then PayKit will then provide a proof to the Pubky app that says, okay, this has been paid, and that proof correlates to specific data on the home server that the home server can now share with that user. That data could be, tracking information, a movie, a zip file, a new podcast episode, whatever it may be. And so my goal is to demonstrate a lot of different monetization methods for data within the Pubky app that are ultimately settled peer-to-peer through PayKit. And then finally, I apologize, this is a bit detailed and this may be a little bit technical in some ways, so feel free to ask any questions, or anybody feel free to research later. Then we separately have another project called Atomicity. And Atomicity is basically the result of all of the research that we've done in the past years and my experience in Bitcoin, kind of showing me that the claims of Bitcoin scaling methods have always been overhyped, and the impact that they have had on scaling, it's been disappointing. And what I've noticed is that all of the scaling, intentions that we have, they all end up unfolding as adding trust into the Bitcoin, process. You have to end up trusting that, you need a watchtower to make sure nobody cheats on you in Lightning. You need to trust Arc in between rounds if you're offline. You need to trust the Fediment provider. You need to trust the eCash provider. There's all this trust we keep re-injecting back into Bitcoin, and with it something that its main value was to be trustless, right?
I don't get it. I never got that.
Well, I can kind of explain it. I can't explain why people are so excited and so willing to tread that path again, but I understand where it comes from. You know what I mean? It's difficult to try to design a solution. It's difficult to ship and bootstrap a solution, and mostly it's just true that Bitcoin just doesn't actually scale, and so nobody wants to be like, okay, I give up, right? You know what I mean? And so everybody just keeps trying, and maybe eventually we'll come up with something really, really elegant and magical that helps us scale Bitcoin in a way we can't currently dream of. I haven't seen it yet, and nothing has expressed that yet. So I thought, okay, well, why don't we make something that just intentionally totally addresses trusted payments? In other words, the payments are entirely trusted. And it's totally abstracted. So the idea is, when you have multiple assets inside of a system, this is the opposite of efficiency, right? Like conversion, when you have to say convert from Ethereum to Bitcoin, or from Tether to Bitcoin, or from Tether on Lightning to Bitcoin on Lightning to Tether on Lightning in order to send a Taproot Assets transaction. These are inefficiencies. They ultimately add cost, they add centralization, they add censorship. These are points of failure. And so you can remove the need for conversion and the ultimate need for settlement, just like you kind of can with Lightning. Like Lightning is taking a bunch of unconfirmed transactions, creating them all, signing them all, but never sending them to Bitcoin. Well, this is a similar idea in that you can have channels with people, you can route with people, but the entire thing is entirely trusted and can be denominated in anything. Like I could literally say, all right, Car, I'm going to give you 5 bananas of credit, 20 sats of credit, and 3 large coffees of credit. And you'd be like, okay, John, thanks. And I would sign that, and you would have a proof, and you could go to anybody and say, look, John owes me these things. You could prove it to them. And you could add that to a system that routes across those things. So this way, say, you want to buy, Keon a coffee. And you say, well, John owes me a coffee. So you go to the store and you say, or you go to John or whoever, and you use the routing system. You say, okay, is there a route where I could get a coffee, token or whatever to Keon? And now John owes Keon the coffee. And so you can basically repurpose credit over and over in various ways. And then we connect Atomicity. This is just basically, it's a personal ledger system.
Yeah,
You just keep a signed ledger of everything that everybody owes you and everything you owe everybody, and you route across it. And then you connect that to PayKit, for incidental settlement. So basically, when somebody owes you too much or for too long, you basically put in, a settlement request, and it looks for the matching payment methods. It looks at, it goes to the PKDNS, and it looks up, oh, what are the payment methods they support, sends the payment request so they can actually settle with you. But the idea is that I believe that all payments at scale are trusted. There's no example of any payment system at scale that isn't hugely trusted. And so the idea that we could ever do that for Bitcoin is kind of imaginary. So why don't we just say, let's figure out how we can peer-to-peer do everything in a trusted way that's built from the individual outward, where everything is opt-in, everything is relevant, everything is related, and build a system on that substrate instead. So
Yeah.
it's similar to Pubkey. It's just taking the Pubkey approach to money.
Yeah, it almost seems like you have to have like a pub key or some sort of next web type of identity solution to even
Right. You
get
need
to.
somewhere to go and
Yeah,
find the data. Yeah.
yeah, you need like a web of trust solution of a sort for the real world to
And I
even
didn't
get
get
there.
into it earlier, and I know I've ranted a lot, and I apologize, but there's also unique aspects to the Pubkey app itself and how we're doing that that would be different from what other people may have seen. And I just want to mention that for a minute or two, which is
Yeah, go ahead.
we
Yeah,
have
for
we
sure.
have this concept of semantic social graph, and because you mentioned web of trust,
Yeah.
and so the
What's that?
semantics, it's a similar concept. So just to kind of for the audience to kind of maybe quickly uh, define some of these terms. If you haven't heard web of trust, the concept is pretty simple. It's just saying um, I am a node and I am a person, and then I have this next group of people that I either trust or support, and then they have people that's another ring of distance outward that they trust and support, but I might not necessarily directly trust them. And it takes this idea, or maybe some people have heard of like the idea of like 7 degrees of separation.
Right.
And that idea is basically that you are connected to everybody on the planet through 7 different hops at maximum. Well, as it turns out, on the internet, on like social media platforms, it's more like three and a half or something, I believe, that there's research that shows. So you're actually much closer to people than you think online. But yeah, the idea of the semantic social graph is that if you imagine that web of trust idea where all of the other people are a certain distance from you and that is the relevance to you or how much you trust them or whatever, you can see, okay, well, trust is just like a one-dimensional thing. You just say, I trust or I don't trust. It's binary and it's only about one context. But there's a minimum context that you have to actually express trust digitally, which is some sort of semantic topic or context to just define it, a topic, a name, a title, a word, a hex code, whatever, something to make it unique and separate from everything else. Then you need to know what you trust them with. You know what I mean? So that's the context there. And then you have to have some sort of range, like how much you trust. So who, with what, and how much, right? And so we're trying to find ways to digitize those things within a graph, a social graph. So in the graph, there's basically 3 elements. There's the public keys, the identities. There's the URLs, the files, where they live on the web. And then there's how they're connected. So with your public key, you can tag, so we call it social tagging. You can tag any other key or any other URL. And this creates all these connections in the graph. But they're connections across many, many, many contexts. It's not just whether you trust someone or whether you want to follow them. It's that I connected with this person and then I tagged them as a Bitcoiner. So now, where not only do I follow them, but I consider them to be this relevant as in the Bitcoiner context. Or I think they're a scammer, and so I've tagged them as scammer. Or I think that they're an expert at some specific thing, or they're consistent, or they're fun, or they're just 5 stars, or they're just laughing emoji. Any context you want to put on any other key or any other URL, you can do that. And so then you can rebuild your view in the application. So instead of having an algorithm that is like trying to like manipulate you and trigger you and create a feedback loop of your behavior, you have a social graph or a semantic social graph that is now trying to help you provide any kind of context that you're looking for intentionally. And so you can create views, feeds, even entire applications that specifically render the graph and the relationship of the graph in whatever way the application builder wants or the user wants.
Based
So
on your
basically,
mood,
you
probably.
are the
Yeah.
algorithm, essentially.
Yeah. Based on your mood, probably, if you want. You're like, I feel like laughing today.
It's funny you mentioned that. We're talking about, we're like uh, dreaming a bit about future features we want to add, because there's a lot of stuff that we want to do to
Mm.
incorporate AI into this system. And one of the ideas that had come up is, well, we could do something like calm mode, where like you could
Yeah.
say to the AI, go and look at my current feed that you would show me, but remove everything that you think might trigger me, because I just want to chill. I just want to zone out. You know what I mean? And so you put on calm mode, the AI looks at the graph, looks at all the relationships of the data, and says, I probably shouldn't show Carr this right now. Let me
Yeah.
mask that and show it to him later or whatever.
Dude, I mean, to be honest, John, like I'm off of Twitter. Like I exited 2, 3 years ago, whatever it was. I'm hardly on Nostr these days. I checked out Blue Sky for a minute, but it's too woke for me. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I love all the filmmakers are on there because I love all the film stuff that's on there. So it's kind of cool for that. Um, Twitter's good for like, live stuff. And but my home these days is just Stacker News because if it's important, yeah, but
yeah.
there's a lot of like-minded philosophical people on there, and I find that it has a great filter once you implement mutes and stuff. So I just use Stacker News for most of my stuff these days, and then I'm around Bitcoiners all day, so they fill me in on the rest. But yeah, so I think we do desperately need um something else.
I don't disagree with you. Sorry. I don't disagree with you. I do think that Noster is a circle jerk. I don't think that is necessarily the protocol's fault or anything like that. But it's a matter of a cultural phenomenon. Like the way that Noster became interesting and used by people was specifically through Bitcoin culture. And so it got a lot of Bitcoiners, and thus got a little bit of a echo chamber in there, or at least a limited set of culture. And now that's what it is. It's similar with Blue Sky. And so there's probably a lesson in here to be learned. And even you said the same thing. Your preference for just staying in Stacker News is because it's your community, it's your tribe, it's somehow the place where you feel like you have context, right? You feel like it's a more contextual place for you to hang out and post content or read content than some of those other places. So do the people on Nosters, so do the people on Blue Sky feel this way. If I look at Blue Sky, I'm just like, oh my God, how is this real? Like these people are insane. Like I can respect other opinions, but they're just like obsessed. You know what I mean? They're just obsessed with hate. And it's not the place for me either because of that. I want to try to like cross post on Blue Sky and try to get a little bit of a following there, but I can't even bear to like look at the feed. It's just that distorted.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important to remember that, and this is another reason why I call it the next web. That I'm not, while the main interface for the web has become very social media feed looking. I mean, even if you think about like Google, when you do a search, it's a feed, right? It's just a feed of the thing
Mhm.
they want you to see the most at the top, and it's instead of making a custom feed or choosing who to follow, you're just putting a search term in there. It's a very similar concept, and so what I want people to try to imagine with PubKey and the PubKey application when we release it is that I am intentionally trying to merge those things and say, oh, what if you could tag any Google search return? You know what I mean? And now your friends would be able to see those tags and incorporate those tags into their own algorithms, into their own applications, and show them in different ways. So it's just as much trying to move the web over to this system and start retagging everything and creating a new curated web made by
Uh,
people than as it is social media or any specific
that would be
application.
great. I mean, there was this, I think it was in 23, there was this company that came through PlebLab. They were kind of like on this Nostr tour or whatever. And I forget the name of it. It was 'cause I think it was called Yaki Hone or something. I don't know if you,
Yakihane. I don't know how to say it, but they
but
still
you know who they
exist.
were? Okay.
Yeah.
So they came through PlebLab and they were there for like a week or so. And I looked at their app and they had this really interesting take on Noster. And I was looking through it and it was unlike any other Noster app I had seen. It didn't look like Primal. It didn't look like Damus. It didn't look like anything. But it kind of looked like this curated, beautiful, like app. And you could see people that you follow because I plugged in my Nostr pub key and I could see this beautiful like the people that I followed. It wasn't the circle jerk that I see on all these other social apps, but it was this beautiful curated thing that I saw, plus a little bit of news. Obviously, there was showing stuff in there because they were from like some other place, but besides that, and there were some other things I was telling them that you guys need to put stuff like that I can block and all this stuff. But other than that, it was beautiful. And I don't know what happened to it, but I remember thinking I was like, man, they're onto something. They are onto something, and I don't know
Yeah,
what happened to it.
I
You
don't
should check.
follow any project in Nostr super closely,
You should
but
check it out.
I have used the
You
app
have
on
used it.
my yeah.
It was a beautiful
I go
app.
back and forth between using that app and using Primal. Basically, what happens is sometimes I do try to post on Nostr and even participate in threads, and then I get like really frustrated about like the search just doesn't work today, or you know what I mean, or
Oh yeah,
things
the
like
search
this.
doesn't
And
work.
then when that happens, I
There's
just
no
switch to
edit
the
button
other one.
either. There's just no edit
Yeah,
button.
yeah.
It makes no
Well,
sense. I don't understand why they're
users
just. I mean,
users and
I understand
founders.
why they don't have an edit button, because
Well,
the people that run Nostr says you can't have one, but it's just like
you know, funny enough, in
from a
PubKey
user
app, you can
perspective,
edit any
it doesn't make
posts
any sense from a
anytime.
user perspective. Like
Yeah,
you should
and
have like a
PubKey app
10.
right now.
Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I'm
I'm
like
sorry.
interrupting
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you.
This is your
uh,
conversation. Go ahead.
well, I'm talking plenty. I'm just you're getting me excited, and I want to comment.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, in PubKey app, you can edit any post anytime. We may kind of, for specific applications, and maybe even this app, find ways to make that more like versioned, so people can see past versions and have some confidence that their replies won't be rug pulled and replaced by something else later. But generally speaking, this comes from how the design of the protocol works. Because you choose where the data source is, that means that you always define what the data is. And
Hmm.
so thus your ability to edit the data is perpetual. And there's actually pretty interesting, it's a different use case, it's a different feel going into like an app where if you want, you can go back and fix any typo you ever found, add a photo to an article a year later, or things like this. It's not something people are used to, but I hope that we can try to find a way to keep it incorporated. Yeah, and yeah, with the Akihane or however you say it,
Yeah.
I have used it. They do take a different approach. They
Yeah.
also do have some features that resembling features that we have in the PubKey app as well.
Yeah.
Like they have some tagging features and things
It's a
like
little bit
this.
more intentional, dude. I was talking to a founder a couple weeks ago, and I won't say who it is, but he was talking to me. He was like, Carr, he's like, I'm just at a place in my journey where I just want to build something that my family can use in the Bitcoin space. And when he said that, I was just like, same, dude. I'm at that place now with we're trying to build this thing called Pleb TV here at PlebLab. And yeah, I just want something my nieces and nephew can use. I just want something my family can use.
Yeah,
And you know what I mean, John? And like I'm through trying to get more Bitcoin or trying to get more like stripes on my badge for being a hardcore Bitcoiner. Like I know what kind of Bitcoiner I am. You know what I mean? Like I just want something my family can use. Do you know what I mean,
yeah.
John?
I definitely know what you mean as far as not wanting to get Bitcoiner cred. Despite that, I am like somewhat known in the Bitcoin world. I'm not a major influencer or anything like that, and I I don't think I ever could be, just because I care more about speaking my mind and sharing my perspectives and learnings on the world than playing a social game with people. And that is a big thing, a big factor that I don't like. As far as like building something in my family, I don't think I could make that claim necessarily about the atomic economy and the grand vision of Synonym, so
Well,
much
you don't think
as
PubKey could be that thing
I'm doing
at
it
a
for all the families. I'm not doing it just for my family. I'm doing it because when I got into Bitcoin, I found the narrative extremely compelling, and so does everybody else that gets into Bitcoin, right? Like that's why we all behave like retards like this. Is like is because like it's really like captivating. It's like for a lot of people, it's the first time you're really deep diving into a lot of the concepts. But as I pursued this captivating narrative, and now that I've been here, what is it, like almost 13 years soon, um,
Gosh.
I've figured out that that the narrative isn't good enough, and I want it to be real. And nobody else is making it real, and so I'm just trying to be at least somebody who is doing, blazing one of the paths that are possible to make that future real, where we do have an actual like voluntarist, individual, self-sovereign driven digital economy. I want it to be real for myself. I'm building something that I want to use, and I'm building something that's an attempt for like a civic engineering project. I'm trying to say here, if like I see a lot of problems in society and a lot of problems with the way people use the web and use technology, and here is a proposal and a model for how we might be able to alleviate
Yeah,
many of these problems just through design.
that's awesome. So when can people try out Pubkey? When is it getting? I see the sneak peek, but it doesn't give me any sneak peek. Where can I? Where
Well,
can we
I
test
did
it out?
send you. I sent you an email, I believe, with an invite code to
Did you
try
really?
the private beta. Yeah.
Today or when? When did
No,
this happen?
like a week ago.
Can you
I
send
was
it in
trying
for
to
me?
help you be prepared.
No, you. Let me see.
Let me
Did you
check.
send me? Oh, you did. Okay,
I did.
I glossed over. Okay, I'm gonna check it out.
So yeah,
Okay.
if you really want to like see what it is
Yeah.
and try it out, at least in its current state,
Okay.
you're
Cool.
welcome to try to
I'm gonna
onboard
try it
and
out
give me some feedback.
after this interview. Cool. Okay.
But to
Hell
answer
yeah.
your question, the protocol is all entirely open sourced already. So people who want to research and maybe start trying to see what they could build with it, you can kind of start. Although I will concede that it is still early and we still will be making breaking changes. So it's not quite at the stage where you want to, fund a startup and build on PubKey. But that everything that is the protocol related is out in the open, and we're working on in the open and available to anyone to play with or contribute to. The PubKey app itself, um, we're doing the private beta right now. We started that about a month ago. We're getting surveys out to the testers right this week and kind of gonna digest that and see how we want to respond to that. But then in June at BTC Prague, we're going to be doing the next scale up. Basically, we're not going public so much as we're going to provide invitation codes for everybody at BTC Prague.
Wow.
And this will be an opportunity to maybe add hundreds to thousands of users, depending on how convincing we can be at the event, and another test to see, both the protocol and app to see how it's doing with more and more users.
Cool. That's amazing. So, if anybody wants to check that out, head over to Synonym.
So the general Synonym website, if you want to know about the company, is synonym.to. And we have for BitKit, which is the mobile app, that's bitkit.to. It's in the App Store and in the Play Store. And then for PubKey, if you want a quick link for the code or the protocol stuff, it's pubkey.org. It's PUBKY, by the way. The E is dead, removed. And then pubkey.app will be the eventual home of the application that I've been talking about. And again, a little bit of a sneak preview as far as the concepts and maybe some aspects of the UI. And if you want to find me and my opinions on Twitter, I'm Bitcoin Error Log. I think I'm somewhat interesting to follow if you care about Bitcoin and peer-to-peer freedom stuff. But yeah, maybe you'll think otherwise.
Yeah, you're really interesting, John. You're one of my favorite Bitcoiners. I've always said that. You're always going to have a different opinion, a very unique stance on a lot of things. I don't. You're not going to get a John Carvalho opinion. It's going to be completely different.
Just trying to be useful.
I've always said that. It's true.
Trying to be useful and learn from my mistakes and the mistakes of others and share those. As it turns out, most people don't really want to learn mistakes from others. They rather learn them themselves, but I still
Yeah.
think it's worth trying.
And yeah. I mean, all you can do is just own your mistakes and learn from them, and you know, that's all you can do. Yeah. So, John, thanks for coming on the show. We'll put all the links in the show notes, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on everything. Is there any last thing that you would like to share? Any last thing that you want people to go and check out, or any last thing that the people listening at home can go and find you at besides BTC Prague this summer?
I guess my leaving message is I've made this kind of message in podcasts in the past, but maybe not lately. Is just for listeners that are still listening and interested, please do try to give everything a fair chance that we're trying to do. My effort to help and design solutions is entirely sincere. There's no profit motive or fame motive or anything like that. I'm doing my best to be to offer something that is just benevolent for society, either by technology or products. And so I hope that you consider, I don't know if you think I'm bullshitting or what, but I do hope you consider what I'm saying, because I know it's hard to detach from the memes, from the narratives, from the tribes, from, to be disloyal to ideas or people. But that's what it takes to find new things and to have new solutions and to learn new things. So please just give us fair consideration, because the whole team is working very hard to just make stuff that helps people.
21 people. That's amazing. Wow, hats
Yeah,
off, man.
hopefully we'll hit 30 in a year. So yeah,
That's amazing. What is
it's
that
hard
like?
hiring.
What is that like? Managing 21 people?
I didn't know until, now. I never managed that many people in the past, I guess is what I mean. But it's uh it's been manageable because we've been doing it gradually. You know what I mean? Like the first year of Synonym, I think was 3 or 4 people at most. And then, it took us a while to get up to this many people. And now in our 5th year, and we're trying to have more. So it's hard to hire, to find the right people for this stuff. There's not a lot of people that have cross section of the stuff we're interested in and the experience that we need for specific coding languages. Um, but yeah, managing that many people, it's different. You have a lot more to do with like social management as another aspect, managing people's happiness and or, minimizing trigger opportunities. These are factors. Figuring out that like, being a company like where you have like 2 or 3 guys as a startup and you make a wallet, something I learned is like, I don't think anybody should use a 2-man wallet, because looking at what it took for us to like fully get our BigCat app, audited and fixing bugs and safe and things like this, and now maintaining that month to month, it's something you really do need a team and a professional company to be a part of. So yeah, scaling up, dealing with project management, we're always shifting the tools we use and the processes we use to adjust for the current situation. Find ourselves more and more just using spreadsheets and less using, you know, Asana and things like this.
Cool.
I'm just rambling. I don't know if if you have other questions about it.
No, that's great. Good stuff.